Well, I think to put it in perspective is it's unprecedented in terms of, we're talking about a mass killing, right? And so thank goodness we don't see this too often. And so it requires additional and extreme effort to address it. So I think that's why there's more questions than answers at this point. And we ask the patients. I think the key and critical point that we make is that we've got these victims, and there's family members and loved ones and friends. With the youngest victim, I can't imagine how that will impact those in the school that she went to. So, there's this community, Sumner County community, that a very small, close-knit community that will deal with these tragedies, and so the complexity of it, I think, explains why there's more questions than answers, and that we certainly are going to take our time to make sure that everything we do, that nothing we do compromises going forward, because we do have a perpetrator that we believe is responsible, and we want to make sure that everything we do from this point forward cannot be challenged. And so that's why we're very protective about answers. We got to make sure that everything is solid in the cases that we will build.
Hi YouTube fam, welcome to Talking Crime. My name is Gina Marie Bova, and this is where I like to come to talk about solved and unsolved true crime cases, true crime facts and stats, and missing person cases that I don't feel have gotten enough attention from mainstream media. If you're interested in everything true crime, then you've most definitely come to the right place. I do hope that you will choose to subscribe to this channel, and if you hit that little bell next to the subscribe button, YouTube will notify you whenever I upload new content. Quick warning before we get started, this video is not suitable for children. It's also not intended or suitable for those who are easily triggered or offended. I do talk about true crimes here, and as such, the stories that I tell, pictures that I show, and language that I use do tend to be graphic in nature, so viewers' discretion is most definitely advised. Now today I am here to talk to you all about Michael Lee Cummins. The crimes he committed are commonly referred to as the worst and most gruesome in all of Tennessee's history. They were horrifying. They were unprovoked, brutal, and sadly, in my opinion, completely preventable. I'm curious to see if you all agree with me after you've watched this video. Let me know in the comments. Let's begin. Westmoreland is a city in Sumner County, Tennessee, and is located between Nashville, Tennessee, and Kentucky's southern border. It's a pretty small town. It has roughly 1,000 households, which equates to about 2,500 people or so. And it's a struggling railroad town. The median income is well below Tennessee's average, and that's why I was really shocked to see that the crime rate in Westmoreland is a whopping 85% lower than the average of crime rate in Tennessee as a whole. Usually the crime rate rises in lower income areas for obvious reasons, but Westmoreland seems to be an exception to that rule, which is absolutely amazing, but it's also one reason why these crimes seem to hit the people that call Westmoreland home especially hard. Frankly, they're just not used to these types of crimes there, but I've got to say I hope nobody anywhere is used to seeing these types of crimes. Westmoreland is a really laid-back country-type town. The streets are lined with trees, and it makes it have that real homey feel. I saw a picture of it that was taken in the winter time, and it looked like something taken right off the front of a Christmas card or like a Norman Rockwell painting. It's actually really quite beautiful. And as things are in most small towns, everybody pretty much knows everybody, and everybody knows pretty much everybody else's business. Oddly though, very few people really knew Michael Lee Cummins. At least not till after all was said and done, and then though few actually knew him, They certainly knew of him. This case had them hugging their loved ones just a little bit tighter. He became the talk of the town. He put this laid-back little paradise of a town into a state of panic and disbelief. But even the feelings of anger, confusion, and sadness could not tear the people of Westmoreland apart. Instead, it united them more than ever before. Today, very few people who live there will speak of the tragedy that took place just a handful of years ago. It is treated like an old family secret. It's kept hidden and rarely spoken of, especially to outsiders. But I'm going to tell you guys today what I was able to find out about what happened in that little town not that long ago, just 2019. So about 5 years from the time of this filming. Get ready, because like I alluded to earlier, I believe that some of these crimes, especially the most horrific of his crimes, could have been prevented, and people wouldn't have lost their loved ones. People wouldn't have lost their lives, at least not due to the actions of this one man, if you can call him that. That's being kind, generous. So I want to say this before I continue. I do my very best to research everything before I bring it to you. If I missed something or if I got any of my facts wrong, I would appreciate it if you'd let me know in the comments section so that I can fix my errors. It is absolutely not intentional. I pride myself on the research that I do and bringing facts to my stories. My opinions are my opinions, and they're usually pretty obvious when I'm giving my opinion. But I try really hard not to give false information. So, like I said, if you hear me say something that is untrue, incorrect, whatever, please let me know so I can fix it. I appreciate it. So, let's get started. Buckle up, it's a bumpy one. And if you're anything like me, it's going to piss you off. Okay. Michael Lee Cummins. He was born on September 8, 1993. He and his sister Crystal were born to David and Clara Cummins. They were raised in a rundown mobile home or trailer, whatever you want to call it, that was situated on a piece of land in Sumner County, like I said. And this piece of land was on the east side in a low, extra low, because pretty much the whole town is fairly low income, but this was way below the poverty level. This piece of land had mobile homes lined up on it throughout. It had been in the family, the Cummins family, for at least 3 generations. Multiple family members living in different mobile homes on this stretch of property. And Michael Lee Cummins was raised in one of them. People that knew David and Clara Cummins described them as being very kind individuals with huge hearts. They say that David and Clara tended to keep to themselves, but when they had to go to town for whatever reason, they always had smiles and they would wave and have kind words to anyone that they encountered. Even though they didn't have much, if they saw somebody in need of what they did have, they never thought twice about helping out. They stayed out of the town gossip as much as humanly possible, and you would have never heard them complain about the cards that they were dealt. They rather to focus on the blessings that they had, and people rarely saw them without a smile on their faces and so obviously in love with each other. They weren't one of those couples that bickered about money and so on, and that's not because they had it easy, because they absolutely didn't have it easy. Neither Clara nor David had a reliable job. They were dependent upon Social Security and the scraps given to them through government aid and welfare programs. If you've ever had to rely on the government for these programs, then you know that it's barely enough to survive what you get. There's really no room for extras. So David and Clara would take little side gigs as they came across them. For example, he might hear somebody needing their lawn mowed or a car worked on, and would do that for a couple extra bucks. Or she might babysit somebody else's children or clean somebody's house for a couple bucks. The extra money was nice, but those jobs were very few and far in between. So, like I said, they didn't have much, to say the least. Things like running water, indoor electricity, clean clothes, doors on like the bedrooms or bathrooms. Once they broke, that was it. There was no money to fix them. These are things that, healthy food, stuff like that, clothes, shoes that fit. These were luxuries that could rarely be afforded. They would have power if they could afford it. If not, let's just say they had no running water and no indoor electricity or plumbing more often than they had it. And they made do with what little they did have. Like I said, they were always with a smile on their faces. They rarely were heard arguing. And if they did argue, usually it wasn't about money. It was more about the stresses and behaviors of their son. Michael is said to have been a handful from the beginning. He started at a very, very young age as far as the mayhem and misbehaving, and just, he was a full-time job, we'll put it that way. There were 4 of them that lived in this trailer, but generally speaking, there was more than that. There was the family of 4, but they would let people sleep on their couch. They had in-laws staying. They would come and go. Friends would come and go as needed. If they needed a place to stay, they always opened the door for anybody who needed what little that they did have, and they had no problem sharing with anybody in need. But unfortunately, like I said, they didn't have much at all. And so when the kids would go to school, they would tend to go to school with dirty clothes that didn't fit, not a full belly. They didn't have like lunch money or whatever. So Michael was picked on at first. He would get bullied by the other kids and made fun of. Nobody wanted to sit next to him because they said he smelled bad. And he wasn't. The other kids and teachers could tell that he was obviously, how do I put this, a few cards short of a deck. He was a little slow, but he showed up, and at first he put in some effort, but it just wasn't enough for like really good grades. He tried to play sports with the other kids, not organized sports, but in first, second grade, it's more like PE or whatever. They went out for recess, and he was not good at it. Nobody wanted him on the team. If he did make a friend, if he managed to make a friend, that friend would get bullied a lot just for being Michael's friend, and so he couldn't hold on to friends very long because it was embarrassing to be his friend. You would end up being a target as well. So it didn't last long though. He ended up getting extremely tired of being bullied, and then became a very angry child who lashed out and became the bully. Now, he didn't just bully the kids that used to bully him. He bullied everybody, including adults. He would talk back to teachers. He'd talk back to his parents, to his grandparents, his aunts and uncles, and what have you. If a teacher told him to do something and he didn't want to, he'd tell him no. He came and went whenever he pleased to class. If he saw a kid playing with something, and even if he didn't want it himself, he didn't want that child to be happy, so he would go and take it or break it. He was just full of mischief and a lot of anger, and I'm not quite sure where all that anger stemmed from. It couldn't have, in my opinion, it couldn't have been just from the little bit of bullying. I could see how that would get on your nerves, piss you off, whatever. But generally speaking, the amount of anger and misbehaving, the amount of damage that he ended up doing was extremely out of proportion for kids being kids. As kids are assholes, okay? And yeah, I could see how that could fuck with your self-esteem. I could see how that would make you angry, but he went above and beyond. Let's put it that way. As he was getting older, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, his parents tried putting him into counseling to get him help because they couldn't control him either. He was extremely unruly, extremely angry and disrespectful, and he would bounce back and forth between anger and depression, the low self-esteem, which would in turn make him more angry, and he'd lash out even worse. So it was, they loved their kid, and they tried what they knew. They did what they knew to get him some help, and it was not helping. They ended up prescribing medications to him, which helped at first, but then as he got a little bit older, he would take the medications more than he was supposed to. He would run out faster and couldn't get a refill because it wasn't due to be out yet, so he shouldn't have run out yet. He would take higher doses than he was supposed to. He would take more and more often. He stopped going to the counseling. He would steal money, drugs, alcohol, and then self-medicate. He was constantly being caught trespassing on other people's property, in their homes, in their cars, and stealing stuff. He would steal from his parents. He would steal from anybody he could get anything from. He went into teachers' purses. He stole from fellow classmates when he did show up to school. He was a D and F student. He did just enough to get pushed on to the next grade, but he wasn't excelling in any way in school. He liked to cause damage to other people's property, whether it be at school and other kids, or just car windows getting broken, house windows getting broken. He liked setting little fires. He liked doing whatever he could to just cause mayhem. That's all I can think of as far as how to describe it. He was just a real asshole kid, and even his parents couldn't control him. Now, as a parent myself, it's hard when you know that there's a child that you care about that is out of control. You don't want to send them away. You don't want to lose your child in any way. You also don't want to pass that burden that you're dealing with onto somebody else's shoulders. So you do your best. And with limited resources comes limited resources. If you don't have money to pay for the help, or if you don't know what help is out there, then you're not going to be able to get the help that you need. And sometimes all the help in the world, and there's really just nothing that's going to change the behaviors of somebody. It is what it is. They didn't want to give up, and they did everything that they could think of to try to change the way he was behaving. It didn't work. He came home less often. When he did come home, he would talk back to his parents, his grandparents, aunts and uncles, whoever. When he was at school, he would yell at teachers in their faces. He would come and go as he pleased. He wouldn't do his homework, obviously. And he ended up dropping out in, I believe it was sophomore year of high school. He dropped out of school completely without telling his parents that he had dropped out. They found out on their own, whether it be from the school calling them, or I think the school was just relieved that he stopped showing up. But as far as the law is concerned, I could not find anything in his juvenile years where he had contact with police, got arrested, got in trouble, or any of that. But obviously that doesn't mean that it never happened. It just means that juvenile records are not readily available online for good reason. And so I just have no idea, and I don't want to speculate about that. So we're going to move forward, and at age 19, he had a 17-year-old girlfriend who, I don't know how long they had been dating, but what I do know is that she broke it off with him, and he harassed her and stalked her to the point where she ended up going and filing for a protection order against him, and she was granted that protection order. However, it only took about 4 months for him to be arrested for violating said protection order. He was caught by police who were patrolling. They seen a car sitting in a parking lot of an abandoned mall. There were multiple occupants inside the car. They were probably up to no good, so the police stopped to see what they were doing, and when carting everybody and checking who was all there, and they got to Michael Cummins, they found out that he had a protection order against him, and one of the occupants in the car was the female that had the protection order against him. So whether or not she chose to hang around with him that day it doesn't matter. It's a moot point, because there was a protection order in place. He was ordered not to have any contact. Therefore, he was going to be arrested regardless. And then when they searched his pockets, he had prescription medications in his pocket that were not prescribed to him, so he also got a drug charge for that. But when he went to court, he pled guilty to lesser charges, and he was ordered to get a mental health evaluation when he was released, but he was ordered to do 150 days in county jail. Now, he did not do his 150 days well. We'll just put it that way. There was nothing graceful about that. He didn't just take his lumps. Well, I guess in a way he did. He gave it to himself, though. He was very abusive to himself. Guards said that he would smash his face off the wall. He was ended up on suicide watch. He was constantly saying that he needed to be somewhere where he could get some help for the voices in his head to make it stop. He needed them to stop, and he was just a handful pretty much the entire time he was there. He attempted suicide. He self-harmed. He tried to drown himself. Excuse me. Tried to drown himself by giving himself swirlies. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's where usually somebody else puts somebody's head into the toilet and flushes, but he did that to himself. He also somehow got his hands on some cleaning products and drank them. He never had any write-ups about trying to harm other people. The only person he tried to harm while he was in there was himself. But he was a full-time job for those poor guards. I felt kind of bad when I first read it for Michael, because, I mean, if he really has such mental issues, then he really needed help. However, when he was out, he had been ordered to get an evaluation and chose not to. So he must not have felt like he needed help unless he was locked up. Now, shortly after being released, he was supposed to get that mental health evaluation, and before they even had enough time to make sure they did that, he was already reoffending. So now we're at August 19th, 2013. He went to his aunt's house, And I've seen a couple different scenarios. I saw one thing where it said that he went there to ask for money, and when she told him no, he flipped out. I also saw something written that stated that he was at his aunt's house and became upset when he felt that his aunt accused him of stealing her money, and that he blacked out and threw a fit. Either way, end result the same. He threw one of his fits that he would become pretty famous for as far as when he hears the word no, which he does not like the word no. He throws a fit, basically, and was throwing and tearing things up of hers all around her house, throwing stuff at her. She said she feared for her safety, and police were called. He was arrested for domestic assault, and then it was probation. He was placed on probation, and I believe he needed to take a class for domestic violence, which he did not do. And then it was 4 years where he just is off the radar, and I'm not quite sure what he was up to during this 4 years, if he just laid low, if he just didn't get caught, I don't know. But the next arrest that I could find was February 20th, 2017. Now, this one's a little odd, but he was arrested for theft because he stole a turkey, a live turkey. It was a white, broad-breasted turkey, and he also stole a game camera, and they were from his neighbor's house there on Charles Brown Road, where his parents lived. They found him because they followed the trail of feathers, and I don't mean to laugh because it's not funny, it's just so ridiculous that I don't even know how to feel about this, but maybe he was hungry. I don't exactly know what the hell he was thinking. I don't know if he knows what the hell he was thinking, but he ended up pleading guilty, and he was placed on supervised probation. He was ordered to complete a mental health evaluation and some treatment at that time, but he did not do so. And before they got a chance to violate his probation or even really get him super set up, like completely set up on probation, he was already reoffending. Now we're at May 6th, same year, 2017. He ended up being charged with domestic assault and robbery because he went to his mom's house where he's not supposed to be anymore, okay? He had to ask permission at this point to visit. He had to pretty much make an appointment. He was supposed to anyways, but on this day he did not. I mean, they got tired of him just showing up and causing mayhem, so he was told that if he wanted to come over, he needed to call in advance. He needed to make sure it was okay, get permission to show up and so forth. But he just showed up this day, and he wanted to borrow his mother's food stamp card. His mother said no, that's not going to happen. And then he was like, then I would need some money, and she refused that as well. Prescription meds, he wanted that too. She refused. He said he wanted mainly just the food stamp card, but like she was giving him something, and it turned into a argument, a louder. Voices got a little bit raised, and things started to get heated. Now his mother's mother, so Michael's grandmother, was in one of the bedrooms in the house, and she heard the commotion, and she came running out, and she snatched Claire's purse and took off with it back to her room. She threw it on the bed, she flopped down on top of it, and she was like trying to guard it so that he couldn't take that shit. Unfortunately, that just pissed him off more, and he went in there and he grabbed her by her arm and hair and yanked her off the bed onto the floor and took the purse anyways. And she ended up, it wasn't major injuries, probably more mental, emotional injuries than anything, but she did have a couple bumps and bruises. This is his grandma. He just threw her on the floor like she was nothing, just for so that he could steal his mother's purse. mean, what kind of person does that? But they ended up calling the police, and her purse and medications that were in there, money and so forth, had gotten recovered, and he got arrested. He pled guilty. He was originally charged with domestic assault and robbery, but he pled guilty to the domestic assault. They dropped the robbery. He was ordered to attend domestic violence classes yet again, and not to have any more violent contact with his grandmother, is what the court document says. He did none of the above. I think he did sign up for the domestic assault or the domestic violence classes. However, something that was said in one of the groups pissed him off, and he left, and he just never went back. Now we move forward to September 13th, same year, 2017. His neighbor is watching TV, and she smells smoke. This is an elderly woman who lived in a trailer as well, and she panicked. She smelled smoke. She knew something was on fire, and she went to look around and see what it was, and she ran outside and ran right into Michael Cummins, who was standing out there with what she said looked like a revolver. He hit her with it and knocked her to the ground and held her by her hair to make her watch. He's the one who set her house on fire. Apparently, he didn't do a great job of it because the fire did go out and he did take off. But he was caught not far away, and was heard yelling to the police officers, "If I get out of jail, I'm going to go there and do it again. When I get out, I'm going to finish the job." So yeah, he was arrested for this. She was terrified when they checked her trailer to see, for evidence of the fire. It showed that they found like old diapers, newspapers, and phone book, and just random trash that he had stuffed in between the trailer and its insulation underneath the trailer, and lit that on fire. So thank goodness it did not catch, because those things are notorious for burning down quickly, and things could have been much, much worse. But yes, he was arrested, and he was charged with aggravated arson, and he ended up pleading guilty, and he was sentenced to do 10 years in prison. Now, the prosecutor told the neighbor who was assaulted and whose house was set on fire that he was going away for 10 years. So she breathed a sigh of relief. She felt like, at least for 10 years, I'm going to be safe, right? And all of a sudden, there he is back out on the street. And she just the prosecutor never even bothered to tell her that he was releasing her. Now, there were police officers from the county that did call and check in on her to make sure that, quote unquote, he hadn't offed her yet, because they were worried about her. But she was not warned in advance that he would be getting out. See, he was given 10 years in prison, but then he did, I think, 15 months, and then they let him out for the rest of his time to be on probation. That blows my mind, because he's done so well on probation up until this point. And he made threats to kill this woman if he got out and finished the job. And nobody knows why. It was apparently unprovoked. He just, something in his head clicked, and he found himself another victim. There doesn't always have to be actual rhyme or reason to what people do, especially when they're mentally ill. So yeah, he served 16 months is what it was, sorry. And then was released and given the rest of the time on probation. Because like I said, he's done so damn well on that. Now he gets out of probation, or not off on probation. He gets out of jail and put on probation, and is consistently breaking the rules and the terms of his probation. He could have been arrested a dozen times in a few months. And he would make appointments to go see his parole officer or probation officer and just not show up. Probation officer would show up at his place and he would, skedaddle out the back window or something and take off. He was constantly dodging the probation officer. When he did go to treatment for his drug use, they ended up kicking him out because he kept getting dirty UAs for marijuana, which in itself is violation of probation. So he wasn't holding a job, he wasn't checking in. There was just so many things. It was also stated that he was not allowed to contact the lady whose trailer he had tried to burn down, and the lady that he assaulted. But according to papers, the papers that were filed, he did have contact with her, and I'm not sure to what extent. I couldn't find anything else on that, but that in itself should have had his ass thrown in jail right now, but apparently did not. Now, on another note, 911 gets a call that there's a fire in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, eastern Westmoreland, and there's it's kind of a shack and no indoor electricity or plumbing. Chickens and dogs and such run around outside, and the shack or cabin, whatever you want to call it, was fully engulfed. And they put the flames out, and they got a hold of the property owners. It's a large property, well over 20 acres, and the owners lived on the property but clear on the other side. So they get a hold of them and find out that there was somebody that was actually residing in this trailer. His name was James Fox Dunn Jr., and people called him Jim. He had been living in this shack for about 20 plus years, just over 20 years. He was given permission to stay there because he basically just wanted to be left alone. He wanted to get away from the world. He just wanted to be alone. Now, his brother and nephew would occasionally stop by to make sure he had everything he needed, maybe give him care packages and so forth, just check in. But for the most part, he lived a very secluded lifestyle, and he was happy. He just wanted to be left alone and live in peace. He hurt nobody, he harmed nobody. He loved animals and nature in general, and he was just a very peaceful, quiet person who just kept to himself. And they couldn't find his remains in the burnt down cabin, so they were worried about, like, where is he, because he rarely left. So they start searching around back, and his body was found approximately 25 feet away from the cabin, and he was deceased, and he had been decapitated. His head was found about another 50 yards away from his body, and autopsy results concluded that he died from blunt force trauma to the head. He had basically been beaten to death, and they had no clue who would have wanted to hurt him. Like, he had no enemies. There was really no reason for anybody to want to hurt him, or even for anybody to even know where he was. I mean, literally, he was in the middle of nowhere, and kept to himself. There was no obvious signs of a robbery, except his brother did notice that his prized rifle was missing, but that was all that they could see was missing. They just didn't. Nobody would think that, you would beat somebody to death and decapitate them and burn their home down in order to steal a rifle. It made no sense. And they had no leads, no witnesses. They didn't even bother to tell the public that this had happened right away because they just didn't want to cause a panic because they really had no answers to give the public in the first place. This was on April 16th, 2019. Now, this is only a couple months after Michael was released from the aggravated arson charges when he was supposed to do 10 years and he did 16 months. This is just a couple months after he got out. But there was no obvious connection between the two. Nobody even thought it would have been him. There was really just no clue who it would have been. Now fast forward to the 26th and 27th, so 9-10 days later. The timeline's a little bit shoddy. They have approximates. They don't have exact timelines because there's no nobody knows but him the exact times, and he's not really talking. So he showed up at his uncle's house and asked to borrow a pair of his cousin's shoes, and they look at his feet and he's wearing girl shoes that don't fit him. And better than to ask Michael, it's Michael, so they just expect the unexpected with him. So sure, you can borrow some shoes. He left the girl's shoes behind, put on the borrowed shoes, and left. And then later that same day, I believe, he came back and his uncle noticed that shirt that he was wearing, he didn't really pay attention to him other than the shoes the last time he had come in, but now he's realizing it's covered in dried blood. So he asked him what happened to him, and he said it was melted chocolate, which was bullshit. But other people, witnesses later said that he stated that yes, it was melted chocolate, but that he was saving a bullet for himself, and nobody knew what the hell he was talking about. So, but I digress. He came back and his uncle's like, don't tell me it's melted chocolate. I fucking know what blood looks like, but I'm not gonna argue with you. Like, what do you need? And he said, well, I borrowed this car and got it stuck in the creek behind Mom and Dad's house. I need help getting it out. So his uncle goes with him to go try and help him get this car out of this creek bed that's not far from behind his parents' David and Clara's motorhome. So while they're working, trying to get this car unstuck, in the distance, coming from the direction of his parents' home, they hear a scream, and then silence. Now, Uncle is looking like, what the hell was that? Looks over toward where Michael was standing, but now Michael is running away into the woods, the opposite direction of his parents' house, which made zero fucking sense to his uncle at the time. And he didn't know what the hell was going on, so he decided he's just gonna try and get this car unstuck and take his happy ass back home. He didn't want to be have anything to do with this. He didn't want a part of this at all. But the police were called by the person who screamed. Now, the lady who screamed because, well, she hadn't seen her mother in a few days, and the last she heard was her mom was going to visit David and Clara Cummins. So she went over to the house to check on her mom and sister, and when she walked in, she had to push past some furniture that was up against the door, and unfortunately she saw her mother and sister covered in blood and deceased on the floor, which is why she screamed, and she ran out of the trailer and called the authorities, who showed up down there and started processing the scene. There were a total of, I believe, 5 deceased people in that trailer and 1 person still clinging to life. I'll go over the victim list with you here in a moment. And then, so they put out a search for Michael because he was not there and he was the troublemaker of the family, so they needed to talk to him. It wasn't hard to find his uncle because he was not far, and they questioned him, found out which way Michael went running. Some officers searched for Michael. It took a few hours before they found him, and during that time, they ran the plates on that car that was stuck and then ran to the house of the car's owner. But they found the car's owner deceased as well. Her name was Shirley Furl, and she had been on the couch with a TV going and a book in her lap. She was a retired nurse and spent her life helping people to die of blunt force trauma and sharp force trauma to the head. She was beaten to death for her car. So now they definitely have got to find Michael. They know now that he was in possession of a vehicle that had been stolen from a murder victim. So now it was even more detrimental that they found him, like ASAP. Everybody, SWAT, everybody was out looking for him. And then all of a sudden, here he comes walking out of the woods, wielding a fucking hatchet. And so one of the officers shoots him in the leg, and that's how they arrested him. That's how they captured him. They shot him in the leg and took him to the hospital. Meanwhile, the other officers are processing the scene, and here is what they found. First, let me say that all of the victims died. All of them had sharp force trauma, but all of them died from blunt force trauma to the head. He beat all of these people. There was one survivor that was his grandmother, his mother's mother. She was barely clinging to life, but she was still alive, and they raced her to the hospital, where she never made a full recovery, but she did recover enough to go home. And unfortunately, she passed away, has passed away from cancer since then. It's said that she didn't remember, and I hope that's true, that she didn't remember any of the events, because she had been laying in that home with these deceased family members, and beaten within an inch of death herself for at least a day and a half, 2 days before they were discovered. The other victims in the home: David Carl Cummins, 51. That would be Michael Cummins' father. It seemed he was asleep in bed when he was attacked and beaten to death. It looked like Clara Jane Cummins, 44, had just come into the room and was surprise attacked. She didn't even see it coming, and he beat his own mother to death. His mother's brother, Charles Edward Hosell, was 44 years old. That was one of Michael's uncles. He was found deceased. He had been, they believe, sleeping on the couch when he was attacked. He didn't even know it was coming. It didn't stand a chance. His girlfriend was also in the home. Her name was Rachel Dawn McLaughlin P. She was 43 years old. They said there were signs that she fought back. So she did try to fight back. She had defensive wounds, and she didn't stand a chance. So she was also deceased. Now her mother, Marcia Elizabeth Nichols, who was 64, that's Rachel's mother, she was found deceased, beaten to death. And then the last person in this trailer that was attacked and killed was Rachel Dawn's 12-year-old daughter. Her name is Sapphire Dawn McLaughlin P. Sapphire, like I said, was 12 years old, and she had been in school when the rest of the family was slaughtered in that home. And witnesses, she was seen getting off of the school bus, waving goodbye, and Michael Cummins was seen running up and kind of intercepting her before she got to the house. And it's believed that he had her cover her eyes, or he covered her eyes. under the pretense that there was a surprise for her inside. Brought her inside, and unfortunately, that's when she was attacked. Hopefully she didn't have to see what he had done previously, but I don't know how she couldn't have. She's the only victim who was partially disrobed. Not quite sure why she was partially disrobed. Nothing in the autopsy that I was able to find states that she was sexually assaulted. However, that's a possibility. It's a possibility that was attempted. I don't know why. And it also seemed like she had gotten some of the most damage. And she did try to fight back, but she was 12. She didn't stand a chance. Underneath her body, they found part of the rifle that was missing from James Dunn's cabin. Part of a hatchet, part of a knife, all under her little body. The other part of the rifle broke while he was beating his parents to death with it. He also cut and stabbed all of the victims. However, those were not the wounds that killed them. It was the blunt force trauma to the head. It was said that when they wheeled his grandmother out, the one survivor, that people had to ask, family members had to ask who it was because she was unrecognizable. And she lived. So I can't imagine what the others looked like. So his victim count is 8 homicides and 1 attempted homicide. Now I would like to read to you a couple things that I found. First of which is a letter that was written by Sapphire's teacher. One of her ex-teachers wrote this. It's a tearjerker. At least it was for me. I definitely did not have an easy time reading this, but hopefully I'll be able to get through this time. It's a rough one. So let's see here if I can. Here we go. Now I found this on the news channel WKRN News. It was on WKRN.com, and this was written by Julie Templeton, who was, like I said, one of Sapphire's teachers in Westmoreland. It was a tribute to the student that she admired. So here we go. Quote, Sapphire, that's her name. It's so much lovelier than the 12-year-old or the youngest victim of the most deadly and horrific mass murder in Tennessee in at least 2 decades. Her name is Sapphire, and she was one of mine. Any teacher will tell you that the memories and impact of their students, their kids, stay with them far beyond the 180 days that they share a classroom. Then there are those who insist on chiseling out a permanent place in your heart. Sapphire did. She did that the day that she was jumping up and down on the playground with that unicorn ponytail singing, "It's my birthday, it's my birthday." I had expected to hear her name on the news one day announcing that she would be at the local bookstore signing copies of Floop Finally Finds His Imaginary Phone or Mr. Whiskers Gets His Shots. I looked forward to the nationwide release of the movie Girl Godzilla. She told me all about that movie one day as we breezed back and forth on the swings together. She had to write the Girl Godzilla because no one else had thought of to do a story about a Girl Godzilla monster. It would have been Oscar worthy, I am sure. Oh, the imagination. I will forever see her jumping up and down and running across the playground as she shared her colorful world with us. I have struggled mightily this week. I have functioned on autopilot, as we all have at our little school. I have tried to make sense of her tragic, senseless death. It's been impossible, but how could somebody so extraordinary be dealt a fate like this. But then a couple of days ago, I was looking through a book of poems and illustrations that she had left me. It was full of colors and smiles and bright, happy butterflies. See, I order butterflies every year, and our class watches as their life cycle unfolds in front of us. Sapphire loved our butterflies. She wanted to name them all, touch them all, and love them all. As I looked at her drawings, I remembered a question that I'd been asked several times over the years. Why are there butterflies anyway? And my answer is always this. There are some things in this world that are not meant to do anything. Their purpose is simply to bring something beautiful and unique into our world for only a brief amount of time. A gift from God just to enjoy and marvel at as it lives its full life in just a few weeks of time. Well, I guess I've been focusing on the wrong thing all week. Instead of trying to find meaning in her death, I need to focus on the meaning of her life. It's a much happier thought. So thank you, Sapphire. Thank you for flying by me on your short journey here and dropping some of your magical, colorful pixie dust on my life. You were such a gift. I will remember you and smile every time I see one of your kindred spirits flutter by. I will always love you, my sweet gem, Sapphire.